This was incredible because not only gave this more confidence to candidates going into the interview, they started to kind of be a little bit more excited about it. They had some helpful tips. I had a few interviews or candidates that were going into interviews where they had a few points on their resume that they knew would be brought up because they were of some kind of concern, whether that was a gap in work history or a very strange career pivot and things like that. So this is something that they ended up bringing up during the interview prep.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenly, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make the change. Today, we have an incredible Tactical Tool Tuesday ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show. Sometimes we're going to interview industry thought leaders and others shaking up the space who are going to teach you how to do something that's helped them and their organization be successful. Some days we're going to cover trending topics, items that recruiters are talking about or will be very soon, and what those mean for them. Every Tuesday, like today, we drop a Tactical Tuesday episode where we're going to go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Sometimes we open it up Q&A. Listeners can drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on. Send those over to us at podcast@loxo.co. And occasionally you're going to hear a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that's been on his mind about the recruitment space and things that you need to know about. For today's Tactical Tuesday, we are joined yet again by Vivien on our team as our resident expert living at the intersection of recruitment and all things ChatGPT. Today is a part 3 of 3 episode and a mini series on interview prep. So nearly every recruiter approaches candidate interview prep differently, but Vivien has cracked the code on the best way to set yourself and your candidates up for success. If you haven't listened yet, go back and listen to parts 1 and part 2. Part 1 was general best practices. Part 2 was creating a job-specific interview prep packet to help your candidate nail the toughest stage of the interview process, which is the interview itself. And today for part 3, we're building off of that job-specific interview prep packet and creating an interview prep phone call agenda so you can be confident that your candidate will ace the interview. So on that note, let's jump into it with Vivien.
Sounds good. So in this case, we're actually going to resume the conversation we had with ChatGPT last time, where we gave it the job description and the candidate's resume to create the perfect interview prep for a specific candidate. And in this case, we want to actually prepare a script and an agenda for the interview prep call that you're going to do. Ideally, you schedule it for the day before the interview. If the interview happens to be on a Monday, set it up for Friday afternoon, ideally. Something that I always recommend is when you send that interview confirmation, go ahead and suggest, hey, do you have some time Friday afternoon or Monday morning to kind of go over the interview prep and run through some examples, and I can give you a little bit more specific details about the position, the hiring managers, things like that. And since you already have the interview availability of the candidate, you can actually suggest a time that you know they will be available, and that way you can make sure you can set up that 30-minute phone call with them. So now we're actually going to go ahead and tell ChatGPT, great job on this, great interview prep package for this particular candidate for the creative manager position. Now we would like to take it a step further and create an interview prep phone call agenda. And in this case, I'm actually also letting it know that this is going to be a 30-minute phone call. Now, if this is something that you know is going to be a little bit more in-depth and comprehensive interview, you can go ahead and set it up for 60 minutes. And then obviously you can adjust this as much as you need to. So now ChatGPT is actually going ahead and creating an agenda, including an estimate for each section, how long each section of the phone call is going to last. So it's starting out with the 2-minute introduction where there's greetings, establishing good rapport. That's good to know that ChatGPT has some good manners as well. And briefly outline the purpose of the call. So in this case, it's actually suggesting that you say the aim of this call is to help you feel confident and well prepared for your upcoming interview with the hiring company. Next up, for 6 minutes, you're going to go over the job expectations as well as company overview, industry trends and competitors, a quick 5-minute review of the STAR method, as well as some previously discussed examples from the interview prep package. And this is obviously assuming that the candidate has reviewed the package. And a 5-minute overview of the candidate's portfolio and experiences, just to kind of glance at it, see this is a good is this a good portfolio for this particular interview, things like that, as well as some research and questions about the hiring company. So this is where you can essentially say, hey, have you had a chance to research the company? What do you know about them? What do you like about them? And this way you can kind of hear how well prepared they are. Then you have about 5 minutes, at least the 5 minutes that ChatGPT allocated for you to review the STAR method and go over some common questions, as well as the last 3 minutes of the phone call, closing and action points, but essentially just summarizing everything from the call. This is really great, but we want to actually dive a little bit deeper. And I want to provide ChatGPT the feedback that we want to assume that the candidate has had a chance to review the comprehensive interview package. So it can dive a little bit more deeper. And in this case, it is actually making some wonderful adjustments. In this case, it's just saying, hey, introduction is confirming that the candidate has reviewed the prep package and understands the main points. In this case, it's just about clarifying the specific role, diving into the STAR method and some specific examples that you can then use, mock questions. And all of this is essentially a really great summary, but now we actually want ChatGPT to go a little bit more into detail. So we're going to ask it, to give some specific details. So for example, in one section, it says mock question practice, and it suggests to post 2 to 3 interview questions focusing more on the challenging and unexpected ones. In this case, I want to let ChatGPT know, well, provide all of that for me so that I don't have to come up with it. The whole point of ChatGPT doing this on your behalf is so that it saves you time. So I'm saying this is great. Could you be more specific and provide examples for me for mock questions and the other sections, so that I can have a flowing conversation with the candidate? And now it is actually giving us a script that we can use, which is really cool. So it starts out by saying, literally suggesting, hello, candidate's name. Let's say, hello, Sam. I trust you've had a chance to review the preparation package. Our goal today is to refine your readiness, ensure you feel confident going into the interview. And then you can continue by saying, were there any points in the role description or expectations that you'd like to dive deeper into or need clarification on? Or after reviewing the package and doing some research, what are your thoughts on Loxo's brand presence? And are there any competitors you've identified that stand out? Next up, you can say, from the package, are you familiar with the STAR method? Could you share a situation you've picked to describe this with this technique? And it essentially kind of dives a little bit more deeper into all of this, including some mock questions, and some questions to that you can bring for Loxo. And then it ends with final tips and motivation. Remember, interviews are a two-way street. While Loxo is evaluating you, it's also your chance to evaluate if they're the right fit for you. Go in confidently showcasing your experiences and seeking to understand how you are a great part of their growth journey. You've got this. And this essentially summarizes it all, and you can use this as is. And that's about it.
I love it. I love that it makes it so there's a good flow. There's a good structure. It is project managing / creating an agenda for you, which is something that, raise your hand if you haven't been in an interview where things go long, you rabbit hole down a certain item. So it gives you a good sense of just how to manage the time properly, especially when you do have so many different points that you want to get into. And then, what's the question that, knowing there's that time length, that's also what's a good question you can ask? It'll probably fit within that appropriate time length as well. So even if you don't use these exact questions or dialogues, it's going to help give you a good sense of, okay, I like that question, but here's something I want to go a little bit more. So it's giving you ideas that you can build off of, and that's where you can put in your expertise as a recruiter and anything else that you may know to really fine tune that conversation. So this is incredible. I know we kind of teased out, this is the type of thing that can give you a lot more confidence sending the candidate into the interview itself. So, is this something that from your experience that you used to do with candidates you'd be working with, or what kind of trust has this provided you with being on the recruiting side?
This was incredible because not only gave this more confidence to candidates going into the interview, they started to kind of be a little bit more excited about it. They had some helpful tips. I had a few interviews or candidates that were going into interviews where they had a few points on their resume that they knew would be brought up because they were of some kind of concern, whether that was a gap in work history or a very strange career pivot and things like that. So this is something that they ended up bringing up during the interview prep, and we were actually able to kind of brainstorm some ideas on how to address this successfully. And this gave them a lot more confidence. They were a lot more calm during the interview, not as nervous as they usually are. And that way you also kind of have a good sense for, okay, is this candidate actually prepared for the interview, or do they really care about this? And this is also kind of a really good indicator of how is the interview going to go. Because if you're having an interview prep phone call with a candidate and they have not reviewed anything, and they haven't really done any of the research, nothing like that, and then they kind of come back the next day and you call them and say, hey, how did the interview go? And they say, oh, it was fabulous. It was so great. I liked them. I think this was a great interview. And then you're talking to the hiring managers and they say, you know what? This was horrible. At least you kind of know and say, okay, I see how the candidate maybe thought this was a really great interview, but based on the interview prep alone, I kind of had a feeling that this wasn't going to go as well. And something that was really cool over time is that candidates actually ended up coming back and saying, you know what, even though this didn't work out, unfortunately, I learned so much. And they ended up going to a different place. And if that company needed a recruiter, I was someone that they recommended. And so it really creates a really positive experience for everyone. Hiring managers really appreciate it because then you're sending candidates that are well prepared, they interview well, and it makes a decision-making process for the hiring managers a lot easier because the candidates can just showcase the relevant, perfect experience for that particular role. And it makes the decision for hiring managers so easy. It's either, yes, this is the right fit, or you know what, something is missing. Let's go into another round of interviews, or this is not the right fit at all. And during this conversation, you can give candidates a little bit more context and say, you know what, the hiring manager is very technical, so they're going to ask you very specific questions, brush up on some of the more technical knowledge. They're going to go deep into that. Or if it's an interview with HR, it's going to be more cultural fit. And this is where different things will be, like more behavioral type interviewing and personality assessments and things like that will kick in. And that way candidates have a little bit more of like a heads up of who they will be interviewing with, because hiring managers, they have everything about the candidate, whereas the candidate just a lot of times just goes in blind and maybe knows a name and that's about it. So this can be such a great tool to kind of navigate interviews and make sure they go as smooth as possible.
I love it. What a good way to wrap this 3-part series. So yeah, we've got to say with pretty much 99% confidence that if you're able to put some of the candidates that you work with through this type of process, you'll get a good sense, are they going to be successful, or are you setting them up for success as best as you can? And then this definitely puts you off on that right foot. So have loved this series. I've learned so much. Truly appreciate you sharing this knowledge with us as always. And I know that if recruiters haven't started leveraging this yet, that they 100% will be. If people want to find this, as always, we've got the show notes included with the links to the Google Docs and everything else, so you know what to put in for the scripts and everything else. But everyone, that's a wrap on part 3 of 3. Vivien will be back to join us for other Tactical Tuesdays next week. But thank you again for your time. This is a phenomenal Tactical Tuesday. Until next time.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.